The October wind carried the bite of early winter through the streets of Boston, rattling the windows of the 42nd floor penthouse where Victoria Sterling stood, staring at the city lights below. Her reflection in the glass showed a woman who had everything: tailored cream coat, designer heels, a face that graced business magazines, yet felt utterly empty inside. The quarterly reports scattered across her mahogany desk showed record profits for Sterling Industries, but the numbers felt meaningless tonight. She grabbed her phone, checking the time. 11:47. Another late night. Another empty apartment waiting. Her assistant had left hours ago, and the building was silent, except for the hum of the air conditioning. Victoria kicked off her heels and padded to the door in her stockings, deciding to retrieve the package she'd heard the delivery service leave in the hallway earlier. The heavy door clicked shut behind her with a finality that made her stomach drop. She spun around, grabbing the handle, locked. Her keycard was inside, along with her phone, her purse, everything. She stood there in her cream coat and black dress, stockings already developing a run from the rough carpet, completely locked out of her own penthouse. "Perfect," she muttered, sinking down against the wall. "Just perfect." 20 minutes passed. 30. The building's night security wouldn't make rounds on the residential floors for another 2 hours. She could buzz someone from the panel by the elevator, but the thought of explaining this to building management at midnight felt worse than waiting. Her pride, that old companion that had carried her through hostile takeovers and boardroom battles, wouldn't let her admit this kind of vulnerability. That's when she heard it, the soft sound of a child crying, followed by a man's gentle voice singing. The melody was familiar, something from her childhood that she couldn't quite place. The elevator dinged, and a man emerged carrying a little boy who couldn't have been more than 4 years old. The child's face was red from crying, his small fists rubbing at his eyes. The man wore worn jeans and a grey pullover that had seen better days, his brown hair slightly disheveled. He looked exhausted, the kind of bone-deep tired that came from more than just one sleepless night. When he saw Victoria sitting on the floor, he stopped. "Ma'am, are you all right?" His voice carried a slight southern drawl, warm despite his obvious fatigue. Victoria straightened, trying to maintain some dignity despite her circumstances. "Locked out. It's fine. I'm waiting for security." The little boy whimpered, and the man shifted him to his other arm. "Shh, Timothy. We're almost home, buddy." He looked back at Victoria. "Security won't be up here for hours. I know because I've been doing these midnight walks with him for weeks now. Bad dreams since—" He trailed off, something painful flickering across his face. "Since what?" Victoria found herself asking, surprising herself with the genuine curiosity in her voice. "Since his mama went to be with Jesus 6 months ago." The words were simple, stated as fact, but the weight of them hung in the air. "Cancer. The doctors did everything they could, but God had other plans." Victoria felt uncomfortable at the mention of God, that familiar tightness in her chest whenever people brought up religion. She'd built her empire on logic, strategy, and ruthless efficiency. There was no room for fairy tales about divine plans in her world. "I'm sorry," she said, "because what else could you say to that?" The man sat down a few feet away from her, still holding Timothy. "I'm Samuel Morrison. We live in 3912. Been here about 8 months now. Moved from Georgia after everything. Needed a fresh start, and my brother got me a job at the tech repair shop downtown." "Victoria," she offered, not mentioning her last name. 4215. "The penthouse?" Samuel's eyebrows rose slightly. "Fancy. It's just an apartment," she said, though they both knew that wasn't true. "The penthouse units in this building started at $3 million. Timothy had stopped crying and was now looking at Victoria with curious brown eyes that matched his father's. "Pretty lady," he said softly. Samuel chuckled. "He's got good taste. Gets that from his mama, too." The mention of his wife again, so casual yet loaded with loss. "She would have liked you. Rebecca always said you could tell a lot about a person by how they handled being stuck. She got locked in a bathroom at our wedding reception for 45 minutes. Came out laughing, said God must have wanted her to have some quiet time before the crazy started. She sounds optimistic, Victoria said carefully. She was joy incarnate, Samuel said, and the present tense caught them both. He corrected himself softly. She was. Everything I'm not really. I'm the worrier, the planner, the one who checks the locks 3 times. She was the one who trusted God had it all figured out. I'm still working on that part. There was something disarming about his honesty. Victoria, who had spent 20 years in corporate America learning to never show weakness, found herself saying, "I don't believe in God." Samuel looked at her, not with judgment, but with curiosity. That must be lonely. The words hit harder than any criticism could have. I have my company, my work. At midnight on a Thursday, sitting locked out in a hallway. She laughed despite herself. Point taken. And Timothy had dozed off against his father's shoulder, his small hand clutching Samuel's shirt. Samuel carefully stood up. Wait here, I'll be right back. Where are you going? To get you inside your apartment. Can't leave you out here all night. He disappeared into his apartment and returned with a small toolbox. I fix things for a living. Electronics mostly, but locks aren't that different. It's all about understanding how the pieces fit together. Victoria watched as he knelt by her door, selecting tools with practiced ease. Isn't this technically breaking and entering? Not if you live here. Besides, I'd rather answer to the building management than to God about why I left someone in need sitting in a hallway all night. Rebecca used to say that faith without works is dead. From the book of James, I think. She knew all the references. I just remember the parts that made sense. And that makes sense to you? Helping a stranger because a 2,000-year-old book says so? Samuel paused in his work, considering. No, I help because it's the right thing to do. The book just reminds me when I forget. He went back to the lock. Rebecca would have said God orchestrated this whole thing, you getting locked out right when I happened to be walking by. She saw God's hand in everything, traffic jams that kept us from accidents we never knew about. Delays that led to unexpected blessings. I used to think she was naive. Now I think maybe she just saw clearer than the rest of us. The lock clicked open. Victoria stared at the door, then at Samuel. How did you... These electronic locks have a manual override. Building code requires it in case of power failures. You just have to know where to apply the right pressure. He packed up his tools. There you go, safe and sound. She stood, her hand on the door handle, feeling like she should say something more than thank you. Would you and Timothy like to come in? I have coffee or tea or juice boxes. She realized she had no idea what children drank. Samuel smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him. It's late, and this little man needs his bed. But thank you. That's kind of you. Tomorrow then? Breakfast? It's the least I can do. He hesitated. I work Saturdays. The shop opens at 8. Sunday then. Sunday's church. Timothy loves Sunday school, and I'm trying to keep the promises I made to Rebecca about raising him in faith, even when my own feels pretty shaky. Victoria found herself saying something that surprised her. What time does church end? 12:30 usually. Depends on if Pastor Davidson gets really fired up about something. Lunch then, 1 o'clock. There's a place called Marina's Cafe 2 blocks south. They have excellent pasta, and I noticed Timothy was carrying a toy dinosaur. They have dinosaur-shaped mac and cheese. Samuel's smile widened. He'd love that. We'll be there. As Victoria entered her apartment, she looked back to see Samuel carrying Timothy toward their door. The little boy had woken up and was waving at her over his father's shoulder. She waved back, then closed the door and leaned against it. Her apartment felt different somehow. The same expensive furniture, the same panoramic views, but the silence felt heavier. She walked to her home office, past the awards and accolades, the photos of her with senators and celebrities, all of it suddenly feeling like props in someone else's life. She picked up a photo from her desk, herself at 30, the day she'd made her first million. She'd thought she had everything figured out then, Now at 45, with a net worth that could buy small countries, she felt more lost than ever. Sunday came grey and drizzly, the kind of October day that made Boston feel like a watercolor painting left in the rain. Victoria arrived at Marina's Cafe 15 minutes early, securing a corner booth where Timothy could sit without disturbing other diners. She'd actually researched what 4-year-olds like to eat, a first for someone whose usual idea of meal planning involved whatever her assistant ordered from the executive dining menu. They arrived right on time, Samuel in a button-down shirt that was clean but worn at the collar, Timothy in what was obviously his church outfit, tiny khakis and a polo shirt with a small stain on the front that looked like grape juice. "Pretty lady," Timothy exclaimed, recognizing her immediately. "Hi, Timothy, I heard you like dinosaurs." The boy's eyes widened. "I love dinosaurs. Mama said God made them special, just like he made me special. Do you like dinosaurs?" Victoria found herself nodding. "I think they're fascinating." "They're in heaven with Mama," Timothy said matter-of-factly. "Pastor Davidson says all of God's creatures are there, even the scary ones, but they're nice now." Samuel's face tightened slightly. "Timothy, remember what we talked about? Not everyone believes the same things we do." "But why?" Timothy asked with the pure curiosity only a child could muster. "Heaven's nice. Mama's there." Victoria felt that familiar discomfort rising. "I'm sure your mama was wonderful," she deflected. "She sang songs. Daddy, sing the song Mama liked." "Not here, buddy. Let's look at the menu." But Timothy started singing anyway, his little voice carrying across the restaurant. "Amazing grace, how sweet the sound." A few other diners looked over, some smiling at the child's innocence. Samuel looked mortified, but Victoria found herself oddly moved by the pure joy in Timothy's voice. "That saved a wretch like me," Timothy continued, then stopped. "Daddy, what's a wretch?" "Someone who needs help," Samuel said softly. "Someone who's lost." "Like the pretty lady when she was locked out?" Victoria laughed, surprising herself. "Exactly like that." The waitress came, and they ordered dinosaur mac and cheese for Timothy, a sandwich for Samuel after he checked the prices twice, and the salmon for Victoria. She noticed him calculating, saw the moment he realized the kid's meal alone was $18. "This is my treat," she said firmly. "I owe you for the locksmith service." "You don't owe me anything. I helped because it was right." "Then let me do this because it's right for me." They ate and talked, Timothy chattering about Sunday school and how Mr. Johnson told them about Daniel and the lions, and how God kept Daniel safe, just like God keeps him and Daddy safe. Samuel gently redirected when Timothy got too enthusiastic about heaven, but Victoria found herself not minding as much as she expected. "What do you do?" Samuel asked eventually. "I mean, penthouse apartment, designer clothes, though no judgment. Rebecca always said I couldn't tell Walmart from Prada anyway." Victoria hesitated. Sterling Industries was a household name. Her face had been on the cover of Fortune magazine just last month. "I run a company, technology sector." "That's convenient. I fix technology for a living. Maybe our paths will cross professionally someday." She almost told him then, but Timothy distracted them by spilling his juice, and the moment passed. They cleaned up together, Samuel apologizing profusely, while Victoria assured him it was fine, that she'd dealt with worse in board meetings, though usually the spills were metaphorical. As they prepared to leave, Timothy looked up at her with those serious brown eyes. "Will you come to church with us next week?" "Timothy," Samuel started, but Victoria found herself considering it. "I don't know anything about church," she said to the boy. "That's okay. Mr. Johnson teaches everybody, even Daddy, and he's old." Samuel laughed. "Thanks, buddy. Really building me up here." "What time?" Victoria heard herself asking. 10 o'clock, First Baptist on Commonwealth, but you don't have to." "I'll think about it." That week, Victoria found herself distracted in meetings. During a particularly brutal negotiation with a Japanese firm, she kept thinking about Samuel's words about faith, without works being dead. She'd built her empire on works, 60-hour weeks, sacrificed relationships, family plans that never materialized because the next deal was always more important. She looked up First Baptist online, found their website with its cheerful photos of potlucks and vacation Bible school. It looked like everything she'd spent her adult life avoiding. Messy, emotional, unquantifiable. But there was something in those photos. A warmth she recognized from Samuel's eyes when he talked about Rebecca, from Timothy's pure joy when he sang. Saturday night, she stood in her walk-in closet, wondering what one wore to church. Her wardrobe consisted of boardroom armor and cocktail party camouflage. She finally settled on a simple blue dress, the least intimidating thing she owned. Sunday morning came bright and clear, the October sun painting the city gold. Victoria sat in her car outside the church for 10 minutes, watching families stream in. Children in their Sunday best, elderly couples holding hands, teenagers looking at their phones until their parents nudged them. She was about to drive away when she saw them. Samuel holding Timothy's hand, both in their church clothes. Timothy was skipping, his dinosaur clutched in his free hand. They looked happy. Not complete, there was still that space where Rebecca should have been, but happy. Victoria got out of her car. Timothy saw her first. "Pretty lady, you came! Daddy, look, she came!" Samuel's surprise was evident, but his smile was warm. "You came. I said I'd think about it. I thought about it." The church was nothing like she'd expected. No grand cathedral, no austere passages, just a simple sanctuary with worn pews and sunlight streaming through plain glass windows. Timothy insisted she sit with them, placing himself between her and Samuel. The service began with singing. Victoria didn't know the words, but Timothy shared his children's hymnal with her, pointing at the words with his small finger. Samuel's voice beside her was rich and deep, tinged with a sadness that made the hymns feel more real somehow. Pastor Davidson was younger than she'd expected, maybe 40, with kind eyes and a slight limp. He talked about doubt, of all things. About Thomas, who needed to see and touch before he could believe. About how Jesus didn't condemn Thomas for his doubt, but met him where he was. "Faith isn't the absence of doubt," Pastor Davidson said. "It's choosing to step forward even when you can't see the whole staircase. It's trusting that the God who locked you out of your comfort zone did it to let you into something better." Victoria felt like he was looking right at her, though his eyes swept the whole congregation. Beside her, Samuel whispered, "Amen," so quietly she almost missed it. After the service, Timothy dragged her to Sunday school to meet Mr. Johnson, who turned out to be an 80-year-old retired teacher with infinite patience for dinosaur facts. The other children swarmed around Timothy, clearly his regular friends, all wanting to know who the pretty lady was. "She's our friend," Timothy announced proudly. "God locked her out so Daddy could help her." The simplicity of his faith was staggering. In Timothy's world, everything made sense because God arranged it. Victoria envied that certainty. Coffee hour followed, held in a basement that smelled like decades of potlucks and fellowship. Victoria, who usually drank single-origin Ethiopian coffee that cost $40 a pound, found herself holding a styrofoam cup of what could generously be called coffee-flavored water. Listening to Miss Eleanor tell her about the church's food pantry. "We serve about 200 families a month," the elderly woman said. "Been doing it for 30 years now. The Lord provides, though it's been harder lately. The delivery truck we use broke down last month, and the repairs are more than we can manage right now." Victoria made a mental note. A delivery truck. That was fixable, quantifiable, something she understood. Samuel appeared at her elbow. "Surviving the gauntlet? Everyone's very friendly. That's one word for it. Rebecca used to say Southern Baptists could aggressive love you into submission. I think she meant it as a compliment." They were interrupted by a woman who looked to be in her 30s, pretty, in an understated way. "Samuel, is this the neighbor you mentioned? The one you helped?" Samuel made introductions. This was Jennifer, apparently, who ran the church's young families ministry. She touched Samuel's arm when she talked, leaned in close. Victoria recognized the signs and felt an unexpected flash of something. Not jealousy, surely. She didn't get jealous over men she'd known for less than a week. "We're having a fall festival next Saturday," Jennifer said, still touching Samuel's arm. "Games for the kids, hay rides, the whole thing. You should both come." "Victoria probably has work," Samuel said quickly. "On a Saturday?" Jennifer asked. "I run a company," Victoria said, hearing the edge in her own voice. "Saturdays are often work days." "Oh, what company?" Jennifer asked innocently. "Sterling Industries." The basement seemed to pause. Jennifer's hand dropped from Samuel's arm. Several people turned to stare. Sterling Industries was one of the largest employers in Boston, and Victoria Sterling was, well, she was the kind of person whose donations made headlines. "You're Victoria Sterling?" Samuel's voice was quiet, unreadable. "Yes." Timothy, oblivious to the tension, tugged on her dress. "Are you rich?" "Timothy!" Samuel's face reddened. "What?" "She has pretty clothes and lives in the big apartment." Victoria knelt down to Timothy's level. "Yes, I have a lot of money, but you know what? It doesn't help when you're locked out of your apartment at midnight." Timothy nodded sagely. "You needed Daddy. Daddy's good at helping." The tension broke slightly. People began talking again, though Victoria caught the glances, heard her name in whispered conversations. Samuel was quiet as they walked to the parking lot. "You could have told me," he said finally. "Would it have mattered?" "I don't know, maybe. You're Victoria Sterling. You're in the news, the Forbes lists. That merger last month. I'm also the woman who got locked out of her apartment and sat on the floor in hallway for an hour because she was too proud to call for help." Timothy had run ahead to look at a dog someone was walking. Samuel watched him, then turned back to Victoria. Rebecca would have laughed about this. She always said God had a sense of humor, putting a billionaire CEO and an unemployed widower in the same hallway. "You're not unemployed. You fix things. I make $22 an hour repairing phones and laptops. You made what, 22 million last year? 38 million, actually. But who's counting?" He laughed, short and sharp. "See, that's the thing. In your world, that's probably normal. In mine, that's more money than everyone I know will make in their combined lifetimes. Does it matter? Really? I don't know. Timothy likes you. That matters to me more than money. And you?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. He looked at her for a long moment. "I think you're probably the loneliest person I've ever met, and coming from someone who talks to his dead wife every night, that's saying something." The words should have stung, but they didn't. They were too accurate. "The Fall Festival," she said. "Next Saturday." "What time?" 3 o'clock, but you don't have to." "I'll be there." Lee. That week was a whirlwind of meetings. A hostile takeover attempt by a rival firm that required 16-hour days and more caffeine than was medically advisable. But throughout it all, Victoria found herself thinking about the church basement, about Timothy's simple faith, about Samuel's sad eyes when he talked about Rebecca. She also made a call to her CFO. "I want to make an anonymous donation to First Baptist Church on Commonwealth. $20,000, designated for their food pantry truck." "Anonymous? You never do anonymous." "I do now." Saturday arrived crisp and perfect, the kind of fall day that made New England famous. Victoria arrived at the church in jeans, actual jeans, which she'd had to buy because she didn't own any, and a sweater. The parking lot had been transformed into a carnival of sorts, with game booths and pumpkins and the promised hayride. Timothy found her immediately, dragging her to the ring toss. "You have to win me a prize. Daddy's terrible at games." Samuel appeared, looking harried. "He's been talking about you coming all week. I think you've replaced dinosaurs as his favorite topic." They spent the afternoon together, the three of them. Victoria, who negotiated billion-dollar deals, found herself intensely focused on winning a stuffed animal at the ring toss. Samuel helped Timothy decorate a pumpkin, his large hands guiding the boy's small ones. They looked like a family, Victoria thought, then pushed the thought away. Jennifer appeared periodically, always with reasons to talk to Samuel. She was perfectly nice to Victoria, but there was something there, a subtle territorialism that Victoria recognized from corporate warfare. During the hayride, Timothy fell asleep against Victoria's shoulder, his sticky hands clutching the stuffed elephant she'd finally won him. Samuel sat on his other side, close enough that she could smell his cologne. Something simple, probably from a drugstore. Nothing like the expensive scents the men in her world wore. Rebecca would have loved this, he said softly. She lived for these events, said they were what church was really about. Community, family, belonging. Do you still feel like you belong here, without her? Some days. Other days I feel like I'm playing a part, going through the motions because I promised her I would. She made me promise, at the end, to keep going to church, to raise Timothy in faith, to not let grief turn into bitterness. He paused. I'm failing at that last one. You're not bitter, you're sad. There's a difference. How would you know? Victoria thought about it. Because bitter people don't help strangers at midnight. They don't sing hymns even when their heart is breaking. They don't keep promises to people who aren't here to know if they break them. Samuel looked at her for a long moment. You know what's funny? Rebecca prayed for me to find someone to talk to after she was gone, someone who would understand. I always assumed she meant another widower, someone from the grief support group. But maybe God has a sense of humor, Victoria finished. You're quoting my dead wife to me now. She sounds like she was worth quoting. The hayride ended, and they walked back to the main festival area. Pastor Davidson found them, his face beaming. Did you all hear? Someone donated a new truck for the food pantry. $20,000, can you believe it? The Lord provides. Samuel whistled low. That's incredible. Who donated it? Anonymous. But whoever they are, they're an answer to prayer. Victoria kept her face neutral, but Timothy, waking up, said sleepily, Maybe it was the pretty lady. She's rich. Everyone laughed, but Samuel looked at her searchingly. She met his eyes steadily, saying nothing. As the festival wound down, they helped clean up. Victoria, who hadn't done manual labor since ever, found herself stacking chairs and collecting trash. Timothy helped by running around with a trash bag that was bigger than he was, picking up one piece of trash at a time and running back to show them. You don't have to do this, Samuel said. I'm sure you have somewhere to be. Where would I go? My empty penthouse. My office where I'll work until 2 in the morning because I don't want to go to the empty penthouse. The honesty surprised them both. That's no way to live, Samuel said softly. It's the only way I know. Rebecca used to say that God doesn't call us to live safe lives. He calls us to live full ones. The difference is faith, trusting that when he closes one door, he's about to open another, even if that door leads to sitting locked out in a hallway, especially then. The next few weeks fell into a pattern, Sunday church, where Victoria learned to find her place in the hymnal without Timothy's help. Lunch after, sometimes just the 3 of them, sometimes with others from church. She found herself drawn into the community almost against her will, helping with the food pantry. They got their new truck, and she had to pretend to be surprised. Reading to kids in Sunday school when Mr. Johnson was sick, even joining the committee planning the Christmas pageant, though her main contribution was writing a check for costumes. Samuel and Timothy became fixtures in her life. Timothy called her Miss Toria now, a name no one had ever called her. Samuel fixed her laptop when it crashed, refusing payment, saying friends helped friends. She had him look at the church's ancient computer system, secretly paying his consulting fee through the church so he couldn't refuse it. But it was the quiet moments that changed her. Timothy falling asleep on her couch during a movie night, his small hand in hers. Samuel laughing at something she said, the sadness lifting from his eyes for just a moment. The 3 of them at the park, Timothy on the swings, shouting, "Higher, Daddy, higher, Miss Toria," like they were both his parents. One evening in November, Victoria worked late again, struggling with a particularly complex acquisition. Her phone buzzed. Samuel had sent a photo, Timothy in his dinosaur pajamas holding up a drawing. It was 3 stick figures holding hands, labeled Daddy, me, and Miss Toria. The text said, "He insisted I send this to you. Said you needed to see your family portrait." Victoria stared at the photo, something breaking open in her chest. Family. When had they become that? She left the office immediately, driving not to her penthouse, but to Samuel's apartment. When he opened the door, surprised, she said, "I got the portrait." "Victoria, it's late. I know, and can I come in?" Timothy was already asleep, but Samuel made coffee, real coffee, not the church basement variety, and they sat in his small living room. The apartment was modest but warm, photos of Rebecca everywhere, toys scattered on the floor, a life being lived. "Tell me about her," Victoria said. "About Rebecca." Samuel looked surprised but started talking. Rebecca had been a kindergarten teacher. They'd met at church, of course, when he'd literally run into her, spilling coffee all over her dress. She'd laughed, said God must have wanted her to change anyway, because she'd been having doubts about the outfit. They were married 8 months later. "She got sick right after Timothy's 3rd birthday," Samuel said. "Pancreatic cancer. 6 months from diagnosis to the end. She fought so hard, not for herself, but for us. She spent those months writing letters for Timothy, for his birthdays, his graduation, his wedding day. Recorded videos of her reading bedtime stories. She prepared us for life without her, which was so like her, always thinking of others." "How do you do it? Keep believing in a God who would take her?" Samuel was quiet for a long moment. "Some days I don't. Some days I rage at him, ask him why he'd give me someone so perfect just to take her away. But then I remember what Rebecca said near the end. She said God didn't take her, the cancer did that. But God was taking her home, and that's different. She said he was in the business of redemption, of bringing beauty from ashes. She made me promise to watch for it, the beauty he'd bring from our ashes. And have you seen it? I saw it the night you were locked out. I was angry that night, furious actually. Timothy had been crying for hours, asking for Mama, and I couldn't fix it. I wanted to scream at God, demand he explain himself. Then there you were, this powerful woman sitting on the floor needing help, and I thought, maybe this is how God works. Maybe he puts broken people together so they can help each other heal." Victoria felt tears on her face. Shocking herself, she hadn't cried in years, not since her father's funeral when she was 23. "I don't know how to do this," she said. "Do what?" "Any of it. Church, faith, family. I built my life on being alone, on not needing anyone. But you do need people. You needed help that night. I needed you." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Samuel reached over, took her hand. His was calloused from work, warm, real. "Rebecca would have liked you," he said. "She would have seen right through all that armor to the woman underneath. She had a gift for that. I'm not trying to replace her. I know. And I'm not trying to. I don't know what I'm trying to do. I just know that Timothy loves you, and you make him happy, and you make me." "What? What do I make you?" "Remember that I'm not just a grieving widower, that I'm still a man who can laugh, who can feel, who can maybe someday love again. Rebecca made me promise that too, to not bury my heart with her." They sat in silence, holding hands, the weight of possibilities between them. Finally, Victoria said, "I should go. Stay. Not like that. Just stay, sleep on the couch, be here when Timothy wakes up. He'd love that." So she did. She fell asleep on Samuel's couch under a quilt Rebecca had made, surrounded by the evidence of a life lived with faith and love. She woke to Timothy's delighted squeal, "Miss Toria, you had a sleepover." They made pancakes together, Timothy stirring while making a mess, Samuel flipping them with practiced ease. Victoria setting the table with mismatched plates that somehow looked perfect together. It felt like a family. It felt like home. "Miss Toria," Timothy said through a mouthful of pancake, "are you going to marry Daddy?" Samuel choked on his coffee. Victoria froze. Timothy, you can't just ask. Why not? Mama's in heaven and she told me in a dream that Daddy needed someone to love him here. And you love us, right, Miss Toria? Victoria looked at the little boy's earnest face, then at Samuel's mortified expression. Yes, she said simply. I love you both. Timothy nodded, satisfied, and went back to his pancakes. Samuel stared at her. Victoria, I know it's too soon. I know it's complicated. I know we're from different worlds. But Timothy's right. I love you both. I don't know what to do with that, but there it is. I can't. Rebecca's only been gone 8 months. I'm not asking you for anything. I'm just telling you the truth. It's something I'm trying to do more of lately. The weeks that followed were delicate, a dance of careful boundaries and growing affection. Victoria threw herself into the church community with the same intensity she brought to corporate takeovers. She funded the Christmas pageant, yes, but she also painted sets, sewed costumes. Badly, Miss Eleanor had to redo most of her work, and even agreed to narrate the story. Timothy was an angel in the pageant, complete with lopsided wings and a halo that wouldn't stay straight. During the performance, he saw Victoria in the narrator's podium and waved enthusiastically, nearly knocking over the kid playing a shepherd. "That's my Miss Toria," he announced to the audience. "She's telling God's story." The congregation chuckled, but Victoria felt the weight of it. She was telling God's story, even if she wasn't sure she believed it yet. The words were beautiful. About love coming down to earth, about hope in darkness, about redemption for all who would accept it. After the pageant at the church's Christmas party, Pastor Davidson pulled her aside. "You've been coming for 2 months now. Have you thought about what you believe?" "Every day. I'm just not sure I have answers." Faith isn't about having all the answers. It's about trusting the one who does. You know, I've watched you with Samuel and Timothy. You love them sacrificially, putting their needs before your own. That's what God's love looks like. Sacrifice, service, choosing others over yourself. You're already living the gospel, Victoria. Maybe it's time to believe it. That night, Christmas Eve, it snowed. Victoria stood at her penthouse window, watching the city turn white. Her phone rang. "Samuel, Timothy wants to know if you'll come to the Christmas Eve service with us. It's 11 at night. It's a midnight service." Rebecca loved it, said there was something magical about welcoming Christmas Day in God's house. Victoria looked at her empty apartment, the designer Christmas tree that her assistant had arranged, beautiful and soulless. "I'll be there." The church was lit entirely by candles, giving it a golden glow. They sang carols, read the Christmas story, and at midnight, Pastor Davidson invited anyone who wanted to accept Christ to come forward. "It's not about being good enough," he said. "It's about recognizing you need a savior. It's about letting go of control and trusting God's plan." Victoria felt Timothy's small hand slip into hers. "You should go," he whispered. "Mama did when she was sick. She said it made her not scared anymore." Victoria looked at Samuel. He wasn't pushing, wasn't even looking at her, but his hand found her other one, squeezing gently. She stood up. The walk to the front felt like miles. Others were going too. A teenager, an elderly man, a young mother with a baby. Victoria Sterling, CEO of a Fortune 500 company, stood with them, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered to Pastor Davidson. "Just talk to him. Like you'd talk to a friend. He's been waiting to hear from you." So she did. In front of everyone, Victoria Sterling prayed for the first time in her adult life. It wasn't eloquent or theological. It was just honest. "God, if you're real, if you're there, I need you. I've tried doing life alone and I'm empty. I don't understand everything. I probably never will, but I'm tired of fighting. I'm tired of being alone. If you'll have me, I'm yours." When she opened her eyes, the congregation was clapping. Timothy launched himself at her, wrapping his arms around her legs. "Now you'll go to heaven too, with Mama and the dinosaurs." Samuel stood before her, tears in his own eyes. Rebecca would be so happy, he said softly. So am I. The months that followed were a whirlwind of change. Victoria didn't become a different person overnight. She was still driven, still strategic, still occasionally ruthless in business. But there was a softness now, a peace that hadn't been there before. She started a foundation, not just writing checks, but actually working with families in need. She used her business acumen to help the church become more efficient in its outreach. She taught a financial literacy class for single parents, inspired by Samuel's struggles. And slowly, carefully, she and Samuel grew closer. He fixed things in her penthouse, a dripping faucet, a stuck window, refusing payment as always. She helped him navigate Timothy's education, getting him into a better school, though she was careful to let Samuel make the decisions. One day in March, Timothy asked, "When are you and Daddy getting married?" They were at the park, the first warm day of spring. Samuel turned red. "Timothy, we've talked about this, but you love each other. I can tell. Mama said when people love each other and love God, they should get married." Victoria looked at Samuel. They hadn't said the words, not since that morning with pancakes. But Timothy was right. It was obvious in every gesture, every glance, every careful touch. "I need more time," Samuel said quietly. "It's not about not loving you, Victoria. It's about honoring Rebecca's memory, about making sure I'm not just trying to fill a void." "I understand. I'll wait." "That's not fair to you." "Samuel Morrison, I've waited 45 years to feel this way about someone. I can wait a little longer." That afternoon, while Timothy played, Samuel told her something Rebecca had said near the end. "She made me promise to fall in love again." She was very specific about it. Not just to find someone to help with Timothy, not just to remarry for companionship, but to fall completely, ridiculously in love. She said she'd had that with me, and she wanted me to have it again. "Do you think she would have approved of me?" Samuel laughed. "A workaholic, agnostic billionaire who didn't know the first thing about children? She would have loved the challenge. She would have seen exactly who you really are underneath all that, and she would have loved you. Even though I'm trying to take her place?" "You're not taking her place. You're making your own. Timothy doesn't love you instead of his mama. He loves you too. And I don't love you instead of Rebecca. My heart apparently has room for both." Rebecca would have understood that. She always said God's love was infinite, that human hearts were bigger than we thought. Easter came with all its promise of resurrection and new life. Victoria had been baptized the month before, going under the water as Victoria Sterling, the CEO, and coming up as Victoria Sterling, the child of God. The symbolism wasn't lost on her. Death and rebirth, the old passing away. After the Easter service, there was an egg hunt for the children. Victoria and Samuel watched Timothy run around with his friends, his basket full of eggs and chocolate. "He's happy," Samuel said. "Happier than he's been since Rebecca died." "You can say it. Since Rebecca died. You did that. You brought joy back into our lives. You did the same for me. You and Timothy and this whole crazy church family. I had everything and nothing until that night I got locked out." Samuel turned to her, taking both her hands. "Victoria Sterling, I need to tell you something." Her heart raced. "What?" "I love you. Not as a replacement, not as a convenience, not as a mother for Timothy. I love you. You with your workaholic tendencies and your occasional inability to understand why we can't just buy our way out of problems. You who learned to sing hymns for Timothy and who sits through Pastor Davidson's longest sermons without checking your phone even once. You who gave away millions anonymously but still clips coupons because you want to fit in with the other church ladies. I love all of you." Victoria couldn't speak, tears running down her face. "I've talked to Pastor Davidson," Samuel continued, "and to Rebecca's parents. And I've prayed about it until I'm sure God is tired of hearing from me. And everyone says the same thing, that love is a gift whenever it comes, however it comes. So, Victoria Sterling, will you?" "Yes," he laughed. "I haven't asked yet." "Whatever you're asking, yes." He got down on one knee, right there in the church playground, surrounded by children hunting eggs. He pulled out a small box. It's not much. It's actually Rebecca's engagement ring reset with a new stone. I couldn't afford... Well, you know what I can't afford, but I thought, it's perfect. You haven't seen it yet. Samuel, it could be a rubber band and it would be perfect. He opened the box. It was a simple solitaire, modest by any standard, and microscopic by Victoria's usual world. She'd worn jewelry worth more than Samuel would make in a lifetime. But this simple ring, offered with such love, was worth more than all of it. Victoria Sterling, will you marry me? Will you be my wife and Timothy's mother? And will you let us be your family? Yes, yes to all of it. Timothy must have been watching because he came running over, eggs spilling from his basket. Did you say yes? Are you going to be my mommy? Victoria caught him as he launched himself at her. If you'll have me. I already asked God, and he said yes. He told me in a dream, just like Mama does. The wedding was in June, in the church where Victoria had found faith and family. She wore a simple dress, not the designer gown her status would have suggested. Timothy was the ring-bearer, taking his job so seriously that he practiced walking slowly for weeks beforehand. Samuel's vows made everyone cry. Victoria, you came into our lives when we were broken, when I thought joy was something I'd never feel again. You didn't try to fix us or replace what we'd lost. You just loved us, exactly as we were. You showed me that God's plan doesn't always make sense to us, but it's always good. Rebecca brought me to faith. You brought me back to it. I promise to love you, to support your dreams, to remind you to leave the office before midnight, and to always, always make sure you're never locked out again. Victoria's vows were equally moving. Samuel, Timothy, you taught me that success isn't measured in boardrooms or bank accounts, but in bedtime stories and Sunday morning pancakes. You showed me that faith isn't about having answers, but about trusting the one who does. You gave me a family when I didn't even know I was lonely. I promised to love you both, to honor Rebecca's memory by loving you the way she would want you to be loved, and to never, ever forget that the best things in life can't be bought. They can only be given and received. Pastor Davidson pronounced them husband and wife, and the congregation erupted in celebration. As they walked back down the aisle, Timothy between them, holding both their hands, Victoria felt complete for the first time in her life. The reception was in the church basement, potluck style. Victoria Sterling, who'd eaten at the world's finest restaurants, declared Miss Eleanor's potato salad the best thing she'd ever tasted. She meant it. During the reception, Jennifer approached her. I owe you an apology, she said. I was jealous. I thought, well, it doesn't matter what I thought. You're perfect for them. Rebecca would be so pleased. You knew her. We were best friends. She told me once that she'd prayed for Samuel to find someone after she was gone. She said she pictured someone who would challenge him, who would bring him out of his comfort zone, but also into deeper faith. She basically described you, though I don't think she imagined a CEO. Victoria smiled. God has a sense of humor. Rebecca always said that too. As the evening wound down, Victoria found herself in the church sanctuary, still in her wedding dress. The place where she'd first heard about a God who loved her, where she'd given her life to Christ, where she'd just promised to love and cherish a widower and his son. Samuel found her there. You okay? More than okay. I'm home. He sat beside her, taking her hand. Her engagement ring caught the light from the stained glass windows. You know what's funny? That night you got locked out, I was so angry at God. I couldn't understand why he'd taken Rebecca, why he'd left Timothy motherless. I may have said some things I probably shouldn't have said in front of the Almighty. And now I see it. Not that he took Rebecca, I'll never believe that was his plan, but he knew it would happen and he prepared. He sent you to that hallway at exactly the right time. You needed us, but we needed you more. Rebecca always said God works all things together for good. I'm beginning to see what she meant. 3 years later, Victoria stood in the same sanctuary, holding their 6-month-old daughter, Rebecca Grace Morrison. Timothy, now 7, stood beside her, still clutching his dinosaur, but trying to look like a big brother. Samuel was at the podium, giving his testimony. "God doesn't always calm the storm," he said. "Sometimes he calms us in the middle of it. He did that for me through my first wife, Rebecca, who taught me what faith looked like. And he did it again through Victoria, who taught me that resurrection isn't just something that happened 2,000 years ago. It happens every day when we let God transform our broken pieces into something beautiful." Victoria shifted baby Rebecca, who was starting to fuss. Timothy immediately made faces at his sister, making her giggle. The congregation smiled at the familiar sight. Victoria Sterling Morrison, once the most feared negotiator in the tech industry, now known more for her ministry to single parents than her business acumen. She still ran Sterling Industries, but differently now. The company had become known for its family-friendly policies, its support of employees in crisis, its revolutionary approach to work-life balance. Her board had initially resisted until she showed them the numbers. Productivity was up, turnover down, and their reputation had attracted the best talent in the industry. "God doesn't waste anything," Samuel continued from the podium. "Not our pain, not our failures, not even our successes. He uses it all for His glory and our good." Victoria getting locked out of her apartment wasn't an accident. It was a divine appointment. After the service, as always, there was coffee in the basement. Victoria stood with Miss Eleanor, now in her 80s, but still making potato salad for every event. "You know, dear," the elderly woman said, "when you first came here I thought, Lord, what are you doing bringing this fancy woman into our little church? But He knew. He always knows. I was thinking the same thing. What was God doing putting a broken billionaire in a hallway with a grieving widower? Making a family," Miss Eleanor said simply, "making beauty from ashes, giving you both what you didn't know you needed." That night, after the children were asleep, Timothy in his dinosaur pajamas, baby Rebecca in her crib, Victoria and Samuel sat on their porch. They'd moved to a house in the suburbs, nothing fancy by Victoria's old standards, but perfect for their family. "Do you ever regret it?" Samuel asked. "The simpler life, the chaos, the fact that you're now known as much for being a church volunteer as a CEO?" Victoria thought about her old life, the empty penthouse, the endless meetings, the success that felt like failure. Then she looked at her life now, toys scattered across the floor, a calendar full of school events and church activities, a husband who still fixed things with his hands, children who called her mommy. "I got locked out of my old life," she said, "and it was the best thing that ever happened to me." Samuel pulled her close. Rebecca would be so happy. She really would. She wanted Timothy to have a mother who would love him like her own. She wanted me to find love again, and I think she wanted someone like you to find faith. Someone like me? Someone who thought they had everything figured out. Someone who needed to learn that control is an illusion and faith is the only real security. Someone who needed to be locked out to be let in. As if on cue, baby Rebecca started crying. Victoria went to get her, bringing her back to the porch. Timothy appeared, rubbing his eyes. "I had a dream about Mama," he said sleepily. "She said to tell you thank you." "Thank you for what?" Victoria asked. "For loving us. For being my mommy here, while she's my mommy in heaven." Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. Even after 3 years, Timothy's simple faith still moved her. "Come here, buddy," Samuel said, and Timothy climbed into his lap. They sat there, the 4 of them, a family forged from loss and found in faith. "Tell us the story," Timothy requested, "about how you got locked out." Victoria smiled. It had become family legend, told and retold. "Well, it was a dark and stormy night." "No, it wasn't," Timothy giggled. "It was just regular night." "Okay, it was a regular night, and I was too proud to admit I needed help." As she told the story, Victoria marveled at how different it sounded now. What had felt like disaster had been providence. What had seemed like coincidence had been divine appointment. What had looked like an ending had been a beginning. "And then what happened?" Timothy asked, though he knew. "And then your daddy helped me, and I helped him. And we helped each other find our way home. To here, to faith, to family, to exactly where God wanted us to be." Samuel started singing softly, the hymn Timothy had sung that first day in the restaurant. "Amazing grace, how sweet the sound, that saved a wretch like me." Victoria joined in, her voice harmonizing with his. "I once was lost, but now am found, was blind, but now I see." Timothy sang too, his little voice confident and clear. Even baby Rebecca cooed along, adding her own music to the family chorus. As the stars came out over their suburban home, so different from the penthouse where this story began, Victoria thought about locked doors and divine appointments, about the God who orchestrates meetings in hallways and transforms CEOs into believers, widowers into husbands again, and strangers into family. She thought about the first Rebecca, whose prayers for her family had been answered in ways she probably never imagined. And she thought about herself, the woman who had everything and nothing until a door locked behind her, and grace opened before her. "Thank you," she whispered to the God she now knew was listening. "Thank you for locking me out so you could let me in." The porch light flickered, casting warm shadows across their faces. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang the hour, and in that modest house on that ordinary street, a family created by loss and redeemed by love held each other close, living proof that God's plans are always better than our own, even when they begin with being locked out of where we thought we belonged.